Two sisters, one man, and a destiny shaped by error and deception. One sister was cherished, the other overlooked. Yet it was the rejected one whom God chose to fulfill his word. What looked like sibling jealousy was actually part of something much bigger. Generations later, the outcome of this struggle would shape the future of an entire people. Why was Jacob tricked? What was the true reason behind switching brides? What was Laban hiding all along? Stay with us, because this version of the story is unlike anything you heard at church or in Sunday school. What humans called betrayal was actually a piece of God's greater plan. Nightfall covered the desert like a thick blanket of quiet and darkness. Tired from traveling, Jacob searched for a spot to sleep. The road behind him had been long and painful, and his feet throbbed with every step. Ever since escaping his brother Esau, his heart carried both fear and a glimmer of hope. But now all he wanted was rest. He picked up a stone and used it as a pillow, lying down beneath a wide, star-filled sky. His eyes closed, and sleep quickly overtook him. Then the dream began. In it, he saw a tall ladder stretching all the way to the heavens, soaring beyond what his eyes could follow. He watched angels going up and down, moving with rhythm and peace, as if following a holy design. At the top, a bright light radiated across the sky. Then he heard a voice, deep, strong, and filled with calm authority. "I am the Lord, the God of Abraham and Isaac. The land where you sleep will be yours and your descendants. I will stay with you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until everything I've promised is done." Those words startled him awake. The atmosphere felt different, thicker, touched by something sacred. His breath quickened and his heart beat wildly. He sat up and looked around. The night was still there, the stars still glittering silently. But inside, something had shifted. "This place is holy," he whispered, standing up slowly. "God was here, and I didn't realize it." With great care, he picked up the stone he had used as a pillow and stood it upright as a marker. He poured oil over it, setting it apart. He named the place Bethel, meaning House of God. There, before the unseen, he made a promise. "If God stays with me on this path, gives me food and clothes, and lets me return safely to my family, then the Lord will be my God." As the sun began to rise, Jacob continued his journey. His goal was Haran, the land where his uncle Laban lived. He had no idea what the future held, but now he walked with a deeper confidence. God stayed near him. The sun rose higher as Jacob moved along the dry, dusty road. The heat pressed down, and his mouth quickly became parched. After a long stretch of walking, he finally saw a well in the distance. Several shepherds sat beneath a few scattered trees, resting in the shade. The well was sealed with a large stone, and the men seemed to be waiting until enough of them could roll it away together. While Jacob watched, a young woman came into view, guiding a flock of sheep. She moved gracefully, and the sunlight seemed to follow her. Something about her made everything else fade away. Her long, dark hair danced with the wind, and her eyes held a soft, gentle light. Jacob's heart began to race. He had never seen anyone quite like her. "Who is she?" he asked one of the nearby shepherds. "That's Rachel, Laban's daughter," the man replied. Rachel. Her name echoed in Jacob's mind like a beautiful tune. As she neared, Jacob's mouth went dry again, but he couldn't look away. Time itself seemed to slow. When their eyes met, something invisible passed between them, as if they had known each other forever. From somewhere deep within, Jacob felt a sudden surge of strength. Without a word, he walked up and rolled the heavy stone off the well all by himself. The shepherds looked on, stunned. He then filled the trough and gave water to Rachel's sheep, still silent. Then, overwhelmed with feeling, Jacob began to cry. Rachel stared at him, intrigued. Who was this stranger who had shown up out of nowhere, like a sudden windstorm? She couldn't know then that their meeting would shape both their lives. Jacob walked beside her as she guided her sheep toward the fields. Neither spoke. The only sounds were the soft bleats of the flock and the breeze whispering through the trees. Rachel glanced at him now and then, trying to figure out who this man was who had been so moved just by seeing her. When they arrived at her home, a servant called out the news. Laban came out to meet them, and as soon as he saw Jacob, his face lit up. "You're the son of my sister Rebecca," he exclaimed, wrapping Jacob in a warm hug. "You are family. Come and stay with us." Jacob shared the story of his journey, describing the dream he had at Bethel. Laban listened carefully, but behind his polite smile, his eyes sized Jacob up. He could tell this young man was strong and capable. A man like him would be valuable. As the days went by, Jacob remained with his uncle. From the first morning he volunteered to help, watching over the animals, managing the herds, and doing whatever was needed. As time went by, Jacob became someone Laban could not do without. Realizing his worth, Laban decided to offer a deal. "You're my kin, and you've been working hard, but it's not right for you to work without reward. Tell me, what should I pay you?" Jacob didn't need time to think. His heart had already chosen. "I'll serve you for 7 years in exchange for Rachel, your younger daughter." Laban's expression shifted slightly. Rachel was his pride and joy, the most beautiful of his daughters. But 7 full years of labor was a high price. He gave a small smile. "Better I give her to you than to someone else. Stay with me." The arrangement was made. Jacob would work 7 years for Rachel, and when the time was up, she would become his wife. Days flowed into months, and months became years. But for Jacob, time seemed to pass quickly. His love for Rachel only deepened with every sunrise. The way she looked at him, the way her laughter echoed in the fields, the way her fingers moved gently as she cared for the sheep. He cherished it all. He longed to have her with him always. Then, at last, the 7th year came. Jacob stood before Laban, his eyes bright with hope. "The time has come. Let me marry her now and begin our life together." Laban agreed with a nod, but inside he had already formed a plan. There was something Jacob didn't know. Though the promise had been made, would Laban truly honor it? Jacob's years in service had been long and full. From early morning to late evening, he worked without rest. He guarded the herds, led the sheep to fresh grass, fought off wild animals, and kept them safe through cold nights. His hands grew rough, his skin bronzed by the sun. But through it all, one thought gave him strength: Rachel. His love made the hardest work seem light. Even when his back ached or the sun burned his skin, catching sight of her in the fields filled him with energy again. He dreamed of the moment they would finally marry, of calling her his wife, and building a future together. Rachel, too, had come to care deeply for Jacob. From their very first meeting, she had admired his strength and gentle heart. The years brought them closer. Their glances lingered a little longer. Their smiles held unspoken meaning, and Jacob always found ways to help her, even when she didn't ask. But not everyone shared in their quiet happiness. Leah, Rachel's elder sister, watched silently from the side. While others praised Rachel's charm and beauty, Leah went mostly unnoticed. Her eyes held a quiet depth, a soft sadness, and a question about what her life would become. Leah wasn't admired the way her younger sister was. She moved quietly, spoke gently, and always stayed in the background. But deep inside, she carried a secret. Each day, as she saw Jacob's eyes light up when he looked at Rachel, her heart ached a little more. The passing time didn't ease the sadness growing in her chest. She remembered the custom. The older daughter was meant to marry before the younger. But what future awaited her? Would anyone ever choose her? Laban also knew about this tradition, and it weighed on his mind. If Rachel married first, what would happen to Leah? No one had asked for her hand, and the idea of her staying unmarried forever troubled him. As the end of the 7 years approached, Laban began searching for a way out. His clever mind worked to protect Leah's future, while still gaining from Jacob's devotion and labor. Jacob, meanwhile, noticed nothing. His heart was full of Rachel, and all he thought about was the day he'd finally call her his wife. When the time came, Jacob was overjoyed. His promise was fulfilled, and now it was time for Laban to keep his. With a heart racing in excitement, he stood before him. "The time has come. Give me my wife, so we may be together." Laban looked at him with a strange smile. He nodded slowly and said, "We'll host a great celebration. Tonight, you will take your bride." Jacob felt a rush of happiness. The day he had longed for had finally arrived. But what he didn't know was that behind the celebration, another plan had quietly taken shape. Jacob's love burned bright, but events had already been set in motion. Before we go on, we invite you to support this channel, subscribe, and leave a like to help us keep sharing these powerful stories. Now, let's return to Rachel and Leah's unfolding story. The evening of the feast came with noise and joy. Laban's household filled with guests, servants, and distant family members. Wine was served without limit, firelight flickered through the camp, and songs echoed into the night. To Jacob, it was the perfect ending to his long wait. Rachel, as was the custom, stayed hidden during the feast. The bride was not to be seen until the moment she was presented to her groom. Caught in the excitement and dulled by wine, Jacob paid no mind to the hidden looks Laban exchanged with others or the nervous expressions of some servants. At last, the moment came. A woman, veiled and silent, was brought to him. The torchlight danced across the night, casting shifting shadows as Jacob's heart beat wildly with excitement. He reached for his bride's hand, feeling her soft and hesitant fingers in his grasp. Walking with her to the bridal tent felt unreal, like a dream come to life. At last, he was about to be with Rachel. They stepped into the dark tent, and Jacob, caught up in longing and the effects of wine, lay with the woman he believed to be the one he loved. The night passed in a rush of feelings and closeness. Outside, everything had grown quiet. The guests had returned to their resting places. Jacob slept deeply, worn out from joy, comforted by the thought that Rachel was finally his. But then came the morning. Sunlight crept into the tent, chasing away the last of the shadows. Jacob stirred, still warmed by the body beside him. Smiling, he turned to look at the woman next to him. But in that moment, everything shattered. It wasn't Rachel. What he saw made his breath catch and his heart freeze. Leah, Rachel's older sister, looked at him with wide, worried eyes. She turned her gaze away, unable to face him fully. Her silence spoke louder than any words. Shocked, Jacob threw off the covers and stumbled back, as if burned. His breathing became shallow, his chest pounding. "What is this?" he cried, breaking the silence of the new day. "What have you done, Leah?" She kept her head down, lips parted slightly, but no answer came. Rage surged through Jacob. He stormed out of the tent, leaving Leah behind, and marched straight toward Laban's house. Fury surged through him like a fire that couldn't be stopped. When he found Laban, he grabbed his arm and spun him around. "What have you done to me?" he shouted. "I worked 7 years for Rachel. Why would you give me Leah instead?" Laban didn't flinch. He calmly adjusted his clothing and spoke without a hint of guilt. "In our land, the younger daughter cannot marry before the older one. That is not our way." Jacob stood still, stunned. His world felt like it was collapsing. He had been used, tricked, played like a fool. "You lied to me," he yelled, fists clenched. "I gave you years of my life for Rachel. How could you do this?" Laban raised his hands as if to soothe the moment, but his tone remained cool and businesslike. "Finish the week of marriage with Leah. Then I will also give you Rachel, if you work another 7 years for me." Jacob felt the ground shift beneath him. 7 more years. He couldn't believe the cruelty. How could Laban treat him like a tool, ignoring his heart? He shut his eyes, trying to quiet the storm raging inside. He didn't love Leah. He never had. His heart belonged to Rachel, and that feeling still burned fiercely inside him. If he walked away now, he would lose the one person he had truly longed for. His emotions twisted between anger and the faint hope still alive within him. Laban's deception had already wounded him deeply, but worse was still ahead. Jacob felt crushed under the weight of betrayal. He stepped back from Laban, fists clenched, struggling to hold back the storm rising inside him. The man in front of him looked completely unmoved, as if his lie was nothing more than a minor detail in a simple exchange. But to Jacob, this wasn't about a deal gone wrong. It was the collapse of everything he had hoped for, the future he had spent years building in his mind, now shattered. "How could you trick me like this?" Jacob shouted, his voice cutting through the air of the camp. Servants and shepherds stopped what they were doing, watching the scene unfold. Jacob's face burned with fury, but Laban remained calm, eyes sharp and unreadable. "I've already explained myself, Jacob," he replied, arms folded. "In our country, the older daughter must marry first." "But you never told me that," Jacob snapped. "You let me work for you all those years, dreaming of Rachel, planning our life together, and now you hand me something I never agreed to." Laban exhaled, as if speaking to a child who didn't understand. "Look, Jacob, the marriage is already done. Leah is your wife now." Jacob stood still, barely breathing. Laban continued, his voice flat. "If you still want Rachel, there is a way." Silence stretched between them. Jacob's chest tightened. He didn't want to hear the answer, but he knew it was coming. "Work another 7 years," Laban said at last, his tone fake and full of false kindness. "Then Rachel will be yours too." Jacob felt his body go rigid. 7 more years. The words hit him like a blow to the stomach. He had already given so much. Years of labor, his dreams, his trust. And now, this man wanted even more. He looked around. The servants were watching with quiet sympathy. The desert seemed endless in the distance. Leah's tent stood nearby, his wife now, though he'd never chosen her. And then his eyes found Rachel. She stood a little ways off, her slender form barely visible in the early morning light. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. She didn't speak, but her expression held both hope and pain. She too had been caught in this cruel plan. Her future now rested on the choice Jacob would make. Jacob shut his eyes. He could walk away. He could turn his back on Leah, leave everything behind and disappear. But what about Rachel? If he left now, she would be lost to him forever. That thought alone crushed him. The weight of it wrapped around his chest like a chain. He had always known that love came with a price, but he never imagined it would cost this much. Laban stood nearby, saying nothing, waiting for Jacob to respond. Jacob inhaled slowly. There was no real decision to make. "I agree," he said at last, each word cutting into his pride. Laban's lips curled into a pleased smile, and he gave a small nod. "Good. Complete the week of celebration with Leah, and then Rachel will be yours. But remember, Jacob, you still owe me 7 more years." Jacob's anger roared inside him, but he kept it buried. He swallowed his frustration like something bitter and sharp. No matter what, he would stay. For Rachel. Would he truly accept this fate, or would he find another path? That night, as darkness settled over the camp, torches flickered to life, lighting the faces of guests gathered for another wedding feast, this time for Jacob and Rachel. The scent of spices drifted in the air, mixed with the soft music of flutes and voices singing under the stars. Jacob looked alive with joy. After 14 long years of waiting, pain, and struggle, he was finally going to marry the woman he had loved from the beginning. Time had not dimmed his feelings for her. His heart raced as he saw her drawing near, veiled in fine cloth that shimmered in the firelight. Through the delicate fabric, Rachel's deep, glowing eyes locked with his. There was no doubt this time, no tricks, no disguise. She was the one he had chosen, the one he had worked and suffered for. Laban, watching with quiet satisfaction, stood nearby. For him, this wasn't just a wedding, it was another success in his careful plan. Both daughters were now married, and Jacob was fully bound to his household. The celebration stretched into the night, full of dancing, singing, and joy for the newlyweds. But away from the crowd, someone watched silently: Leah. She sat in the shadows of a tent, her heart heavy. Though she had been Jacob's first wife, she knew she was never truly wanted. The way Jacob looked at Rachel, so full of warmth and devotion, was something he had never given her. Her hands clutched her dress tightly, and she turned her face away. Her place in this family felt painful. The shame clung to her like a second skin. The next morning, Jacob stepped out from the bridal tent smiling, his face lit with peace. For him, it felt like God's promise was finally beginning to unfold, but his joy didn't last. Leah was there, standing quietly. She didn't speak, only kept her gaze down, as if waiting for his reaction. Jacob felt a rising discomfort. She was still his wife. But how could he split his heart between two women, especially one he had never chosen? The days that followed were filled with tension. Rachel, confident in Jacob's affection, made sure her presence was known. She walked beside him, exchanged gentle touches, smiled often, but deep within, her confidence was beginning to weaken. A silent weight pressed down on her. She could not conceive. Month after month passed, yet no child came. Jacob continued to look at her with love, but the pressure from others and from tradition pressed in around her. Meanwhile, Leah became pregnant. Word spread quickly, and the camp buzzed with the news. The wife Jacob cared for least was now carrying his first child. Rachel tried to hide her heartbreak, but the pain was clear in her eyes. Jacob, too, was troubled. He didn't love Leah, but she was now the mother of his child. Leah felt a complicated mix of pride and sorrow. She finally had something Rachel didn't, yet deep inside she knew that even this would not win Jacob's heart. What had once been a place of love and hope was now full of silent competition and emotional strain. The rivalry between the sisters had only just begun. As weeks became months, Jacob's home turned into a place of quiet struggle. His love for Rachel was clear to everyone, and Leah had to live with the cold truth of being merely tolerated. Each glance, each word, each silence revealed that Jacob saw her as a duty, not as someone he cherished. Yet Leah remained strong. She carried on with her role as wife and mother, even in a household that never fully welcomed her. Rachel, on the other hand, knew without a doubt that she was the one Jacob loved. She moved through the camp with pride, holding her place as the chosen one. Still, a shadow followed her every step. No matter how much Jacob adored her, her arms stayed empty. Every month brought a fresh wave of hope, followed by bitter disappointment. At night, Leah cried out, not for riches, not even for Jacob's affection. All she wanted was to be noticed, to be treated as someone who mattered. And God listened. He opened her womb once more. When the news traveled through the camp, reactions came swiftly. Leah was expecting again, while Rachel remained without a child. Her older sister now carried another heir for Jacob. Leah had a son and named him Reuben. She said, "The Lord has seen my pain. Now my husband will surely love me." But that wasn't how things turned out. Jacob's heart didn't shift. His eyes remained cold toward Leah, and his love for Rachel stayed unchanged. Reuben's birth didn't bring the acceptance Leah had hoped for. Still, God did not turn away from her. Leah became pregnant again and had another son. She named him Simeon, saying, "The Lord heard that I am unloved, and he has given me another child." But Jacob stayed distant. Then, with unshaken faith, Leah gave birth to a third son. She called him Levi, saying, "Now maybe my husband will feel close to me." Yet Jacob's heart remained untouched. Later, Leah had a fourth son. She named him Judah. This time, her words were different. "Now I will give thanks to the Lord." Something shifted inside her. Before she had longed for her husband's approval, but now she found peace in the love of the God who never ignored her, even when others did. While Leah welcomed child after child, Rachel's pain deepened. Her pride, once strong, began to break with each new baby Leah brought into the world. She felt helpless, as if forgotten by heaven itself. Her sorrows slowly turned into resentment. She spent her days full of grief, turning away when children played near her, shutting out the sound of their laughter. Every time she saw Jacob holding one of Leah's boys, her heart filled with quiet rage. One night, unable to hold back, Rachel confronted Jacob. "Give me children, or I'll die." Her voice cracked with desperation. Jacob, who had always treated her with kindness, suddenly burst out. "Do you think I'm God? Am I the one keeping you from having children?" Rachel froze. His words cut deep, exposing a pain she had tried to hide from everyone. The tension between the sisters had now reached a breaking point. The Lord would act again, but whether it would bring peace or stir more trouble was still unknown. In Jacob's tents, the sound of children's laughter never stopped. Leah, once rejected, was now the mother of 4 sons. Each boy carried meaning, each birth a reminder of God's favor. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah grew strong under Leah's loving care. Jacob still showed little warmth toward her, but Leah found joy in the life she had created. Her heart rested in what God had given her. Rachel, the one Jacob had always loved, now felt like she lived in Leah's shadow. Her body remained empty and her spirit wounded. Every child that Leah bore made Rachel's shame feel heavier. Leah, the sister who had once been overlooked, now walked through the camp with quiet dignity. Leah's children ran freely, laughing as they played near the campfires. Even if Jacob kept his distance, he could not completely ignore them. Rachel, however, had only silence and sorrow. Days turned into years. Each time Leah showed signs of a new pregnancy, Rachel quietly pulled away. She couldn't bear to see it. Jealousy burned inside her, slowly consuming what little joy remained. What good was Jacob's love if she could not give him children? She watched Leah singing softly to her sons, weaving their clothes with care. She saw them run into their mother's arms, and something inside her cracked. The ache became unbearable. Out of frustration, Rachel grew colder toward Leah. Once her sense of superiority had come easily. Now it was just a mask, something to hide the pain she couldn't speak out loud. When the women in the camp talked about Leah's growing family, Rachel would walk away without a word. When servants praised Leah's strong sons, Rachel silenced them with a glance. But none of it made the pain go away. One day, Unable to carry the weight any longer, Rachel broke. Tears streamed down her face as she approached Jacob, her voice shaking. "Give me children, or I will die." It wasn't just a request. It was the cry of a soul breaking apart. Jacob, shocked by the sudden outburst, responded with anger. He had endured much, years of waiting, years of hard work for her, and now she blamed him? "Am I God? Am I the one keeping you from having children?" The words landed like stones. Rachel turned her eyes away. His voice had not meant to wound her, but it did. She couldn't accept a life like this. She wouldn't let Leah continue winning while she stood empty-handed. That night, while the camp slept, Rachel lay awake. Her thoughts raced in the darkness. She needed a solution, and then she remembered Sarah, Abraham's wife. Sarah too had been barren. In her desperation, she had given her servant, Hagar, to her husband, hoping to build a family through her. Rachel saw her path. At sunrise, with firm resolve, she brought her servant Bilhah to Jacob. "Take her as your wife. Let her carry a child for me, and through her I will become a mother." Jacob looked at her surprised, but he saw the pain in Rachel's eyes, saw how deeply she longed for a child. He agreed. So Bilhah became Jacob's wife, and Rachel watched every step with hope. Though she wasn't carrying the child herself, she felt like something was finally changing. When Bilhah's labor began, Rachel's heart beat fast. The moment had come. At last, she would have a child to hold. When the baby was born, Rachel took him into her arms, tears streaming down her cheeks. "He will be called Dan," Rachel said, "for God has judged in my favor and listened to my cry." The camp quickly filled with whispers. Leah, watching from a distance, felt a heavy weight settle in her chest. Rachel now held a son, and Jacob received the child with warmth, but the rivalry was far from finished. Time moved on, and Bilhah gave Jacob a second son. Proudly, Rachel lifted the baby into her arms. "His name will be Naphtali," she declared, "for I have wrestled with my sister and have won." Leah heard those words, and a chill ran through her. Was this the end of her place in Jacob's life? Her heart tightened as she saw Jacob smiling at Rachel's children. A thought came over her like a lightning bolt. If Rachel could give her servant to Jacob, then so could she. That same night, Leah went to Jacob and said firmly, "Take my servant Zilpah as your wife. Through her, I too will build my family." Jacob, tired of the constant tension between the sisters, simply agreed. Soon Zilpah became pregnant, and when the child was born, Leah smiled with pride. "His name will be Gad," she said, "for good fortune has come to me." Not long after, Zilpah had another son. Leah lifted him up and declared, "He will be called Asher, for I am happy, and women will call me blessed." Now the camp was divided into quiet battles. Each child had become a symbol in the unspoken war between the women. Jealousy flared, and the tents were filled with rivalry disguised as celebration. One day, Reuben, Leah's first son, returned from the fields with mandrakes, roots believed to increase fertility. Rachel saw them and couldn't hide her desire. "Please, give me some of your son's mandrakes," she said. Leah looked at her sharply. "Isn't it enough that you've taken my husband? Now you also want my son's mandrakes." Rachel paused, trying to stay calm. She needed those roots. "If you give them to me, Jacob will sleep in your tent tonight," she offered. Leah thought for a moment. Then she agreed. That evening, as Jacob returned from the fields, Leah walked out to meet him. "You must come with me tonight," she said firmly, "for I have paid for your time with mandrakes." Jacob didn't argue. He followed her back to her tent. But how much longer could this silent war between sisters last? The camp echoed with the laughter of many children. Sons born to Leah, Zilpah, and Bilhah ran between the tents. Their mothers exchanged proud yet guarded looks. Leah had already given Jacob 6 sons: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. And through her servant Zilpah she had added Gad and Asher to the family. Bilhah, Rachel's servant, had given birth to Dan and Naphtali. Yet even with all these children in the camp, Rachel's heart remained heavy. Though she was the one Jacob loved most, the pain of being barren still consumed her. She noticed how Jacob's face would soften when he saw Leah's children, and it only deepened her sorrow. Rachel tried to feel joy for the sons Bilhah had given her, but the emptiness inside would not go away. She watched Leah gently holding little Zebulun and wondered if she would ever know that same feeling. Jacob, always kind and patient, tried to comfort her. "Rachel, my love for you doesn't depend on children," he said, taking her hands in his. But Rachel wanted more than his words. She longed for a child of her own. As Rachel carried her pain in silence, Leah, already the mother of many, was blessed again. Tears filled her eyes when she realized she was expecting once more. When the baby arrived and it was a girl, she held her close and said softly, "Her name will be Dinah." But even with so many sons, and now a daughter, Jacob's heart still belonged to Rachel. Nothing could change that. Then, one day, Rachel noticed something strange. Her body felt different. Time passed, and the signs became clear. She was pregnant. The news spread through the camp like fire. People whispered and watched. Leah, from a distance, kept her emotions hidden, but Jacob's heart overflowed with joy. "The Lord has heard me," Rachel whispered, tears falling from her eyes. Months passed, and the day finally came. The labor was long and painful, but Rachel endured it with hope burning in her chest. Then the cry of a baby echoed through the tent. Jacob lifted the newborn and looked into Rachel's eyes. "A son, Rachel. You have a son." With tears and a gentle smile, she whispered, "His name will be Joseph, for the Lord has added to me a son." Now that she had her own child, would her heart finally be at peace? As the years passed, Jacob's camp grew louder with the voices of his many children. They played among the animals, while his wives managed the tents and daily routines. Joseph, the long-awaited son of Rachel, thrived. He grew strong and healthy in her arms. Her smile became more natural, and she carried a joy she had never known before. But even in the middle of all this happiness, Jacob felt another burden, the weight of being tied to Laban. He had given 14 years of his life to serve him, first for Leah, then for Rachel. Now his heart longed for something else. He wanted freedom. One day, Jacob found Laban sitting near the animal pens. It was time to speak. "Let me go," Jacob said with resolve. "I've done all that was asked of me and have served you well. I want to take my family and start my own life." Laban didn't like what he heard. He knew that ever since Jacob arrived, blessings had followed. His flocks had grown like never before. "Stay, Jacob," Laban replied. "I know the Lord is with you, and because of you, my wealth has multiplied. Name your price. I'll pay whatever you ask." Jacob paused. He knew his father-in-law too well. Laban was clever, always trying to gain more than he gave. But Jacob was no longer the inexperienced man he had once been. "I don't want anything from you," Jacob answered. "Just allow me to take the speckled, spotted and dark-colored animals from your herds. You can keep the pure white ones." Laban smiled. He believed he was getting the better end of the deal. Most animals were usually born without markings. To him, it seemed like a smart trade. "Agreed," Laban said, shaking Jacob's hand. But Laban had no intention of playing fair. That very night he told his sons to remove the best speckled and spotted animals and take them far away. He hoped this would keep Jacob from growing his own flock. Jacob soon realized what had happened, but he didn't give up. He trusted that God would still bless him. He tried something unusual. He cut branches from nearby trees and peeled away strips of bark to create white streaks. Then he placed the branches in the watering troughs where the animals mated. Strangely, the offspring that followed were exactly what he needed: spotted, speckled, and dark-colored. Season after season, Jacob's herd increased. The healthiest animals became his, while the weaker ones remained with Laban. Laban was stunned. His eyes narrowed in anger. How was Jacob succeeding so quickly? Laban's sons started whispering among themselves. "Jacob is stealing our father's wealth," they said. Soon, Laban's attitude toward Jacob changed. The kindness faded. His glances grew sharp and resentment filled the space between them. Jacob felt it. The peace was gone. What had started as cooperation had turned into hostility. One night, Jacob had a dream. In it, God appeared to him and said, "Get up, Jacob. Go back to the land of your ancestors. I will be with you." When Jacob woke, he understood immediately. It was time. He could no longer trust Laban. Too much had been taken. Too many lies had been told. But how could he leave without being stopped? Would he be tricked again? As the first light of morning appeared, Jacob made a decision he could not take back. Jacob looked over his large herds, his wives, and his many children. He knew he could no longer stay under Laban's control. God had called him to return to the land of his ancestors, but with that calling came a deep fear, facing Esau. Knowing Laban would never let him go willingly, Jacob planned his departure carefully. He waited for the right moment when Laban was far away, busy shearing his sheep. Then, quietly, he gathered all his belongings, his servants, and his entire family. Rachel, the wife he loved most, turned back for one last look at her childhood home. But before leaving, she did something in secret. She took her father's household idols and hid them away. In silence, the caravan left during the night, moving swiftly through the dry paths, guided only by the stars above. Jacob knew he couldn't keep running forever. 3 days later, Laban found out Jacob was gone. Anger filled him. He gathered his men and began the chase. For 7 days, they traveled without rest. At last, they caught up with Jacob near the mountains of Gilead. Laban approached, furious. "How dare you leave like a thief? And why have you taken my household gods?" Jacob was stunned. He hadn't taken anything. He didn't know what Rachel had done. Before he could respond, Rachel had already hidden the idols under her saddle and sat on them. When Laban came searching through the tents, she remained seated, claiming she was unwell and couldn't rise. He found nothing. After a long argument, the two men reached a peace. They built a pile of stones as a sign of their promise. "Let the Lord watch between us when we are far from one another," Laban said, locking eyes with Jacob. Then Laban turned back toward his land, and Jacob continued forward, toward what frightened him even more: Esau, the brother he had tricked, the one who had once promised to kill him. Jacob sent messengers ahead, offering gifts and words of humility, but when they returned, Jacob's heart nearly stopped. "Esau is coming to meet you," they said, "and he's bringing 400 men." Jacob felt terror crash over him like a wave. He had no army. He only had his wives, his children, and his servants. None of them could protect him. In desperation, Jacob dropped to his knees. "O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac," he cried, "you told me to return home, and I have obeyed, but I am not worthy of the kindness you've shown me. Save me from Esau's anger, Jacob prayed. "I'm afraid he'll come and destroy everything I love." After pouring out his fears to God, Jacob split his caravan into two groups. If Esau attacked one, the other might survive. As a final effort, he sent wave after wave of gifts ahead, flocks of sheep, goats, rams, camels, all selected carefully in hopes of softening Esau's heart. When night fell, Jacob remained behind, alone, waiting for a dawn that could change everything. But trouble wasn't finished with him yet. While Jacob watched the stars in fear, something else was catching up to him, something left unresolved. The dust of his escape hadn't settled before Laban's fury arrived like a storm. With his men beside him, Laban came racing across the wilderness, anger blazing in his eyes, his heart full of offense. For 7 days he chased Jacob across dry paths and rocky hills. At last, he found him in the mountains of Gilead. "How dare you run off like a thief in the night?" Laban shouted, standing face to face with Jacob. "You left without a word. I would have sent you away with music and a celebration." Jacob stood his ground, arms crossed. "I left because I feared you would stop me. I worked for you for 20 years, and still you treat me like I'm nothing." Laban narrowed his gaze. "Then tell me, why did you steal my household gods?" Silence fell like a heavy curtain. Jacob's brow furrowed. He didn't understand. "Steal from you? Whoever took them, let them die," he said firmly, unaware that someone close to him held the truth. Laban's men began to search the tents. Rachel, calm and still, sat atop her camel's saddle, fingers pressed tightly against the worn leather. Beneath her, hidden and unmoving, were her father's idols. Her heart pounded in her chest. As Laban drew near, Rachel looked up with a gentle expression and spoke softly. "Forgive me, father," she said. "I cannot rise. It is that time of the month." Laban paused. By tradition, he could not demand she move. With suspicion still in his eyes, he turned away, never knowing that his daughter had lied. Rachel closed her eyes, holding back a breath. She knew Jacob would never have accepted what she'd done. But why had she taken the idols? Was it to hurt her father, who had tricked and used them for so long, or was it a final link to the home she had left behind? Laban found nothing, but pride still colored his voice. "Everything you see, your flocks, your children, it all came from me," he said. "Let the Lord decide between us." Tired of it all, Jacob rose, his eyes fierce. "I served you without rest, day and night, through cold nights and burning days. You tricked me over and over again. If it hadn't been for the God of my father, you would have sent me away with nothing." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Laban realized his power over Jacob had ended. With no options left, he offered a truce. They built a heap of stones as a symbol of peace between them. "May the Lord keep watch between you and me while we are apart," Laban said seriously. Jacob agreed. The two men shared a final meal to seal their pact. At sunrise, Laban embraced his daughters and grandchildren. Then he turned and disappeared into the distance. But as the dust settled, Jacob's heart grew uneasy. Laban was gone, but a deeper fear remained, and a new question. What was Rachel hiding? The winds swept over the hills of Gilead, carrying the sense that something unknown was about to be revealed. Jacob, still weary from the argument with Laban, felt uneasy. Laban's final words echoed in his thoughts. That night, as darkness fell, Laban returned, not angry, but quiet, his face carrying the weight of something long kept secret. "Jacob," he said softly, "there's something I never told you." Jacob stood still, arms crossed. "Go on." Laban hesitated. "Rachel. There was a man. She was promised to him long before you ever came here." The words hit Jacob like a sudden blow. "What?" he said, barely able to speak. You kept this from me?" Laban looked away. When you first saw her and fell in love, it was already too late. Her future had been decided. Then why did you let me serve 7 years for her? Jacob's voice rose with fury. Laban sighed. I needed time. If that man returned, I would have had to give her away. But he never did. And when I saw the chance, I took it. Jacob's hands shook. A chance. You saw your daughter's lives as something to use. Laban raised a hand. And Leah. Do you think she wasn't caught in this too? Jacob froze. Leah, quiet until now, looked down. Since I was a child, I was told I'd never be wanted, she whispered, but my father promised he'd find me a place. Her eyes glistened with tears. That night, when I was brought to you, I knew you'd never love me, but at least I would have a husband. The pain in Leah's eyes struck Jacob in a way he hadn't expected. He had never truly stopped to think about her suffering. But before he could say a word, Rachel stepped forward, her face pale with anger and betrayal. "And what about me?" she shouted, her voice shaking. "Was my life decided without even asking me? I was promised to another man, and no one thought I deserved to know." Laban looked at her, and for the first time, shame touched his face. "I did what I thought was best for the family," he said quietly. Rachel let out a bitter laugh. "Best for who? For you? Or for the way you manipulate everyone like pieces on a board?" Her chest rose and fell as her fury built. Then she turned toward Jacob. "And you? Do you still believe everything we shared was real?" Silence dropped over them. Jacob glanced from Rachel to Leah. The truth hit him like a heavy weight. Everything he thought he had built was built on lies. He hadn't truly won Rachel. Leah hadn't truly chosen to be with him. And Rachel, just like him, had been misled from the very start. The life he thought he had lived was not what it seemed. Now the night stretched quiet around them, the only sound the wind whispering through the hills of Gilead, carrying the silence that none of them could break. Jacob stood still, the truth pressing hard against his chest. For years he had believed he was simply fighting to win Rachel's heart. But now he saw something far deeper. Through all the confusion, through every twist and betrayal, God had been guiding him toward something he hadn't yet understood. He walked through the camp alone, his thoughts racing. He had believed it was a battle between him and Laban, but now he saw clearly this was never just about people. Looking up at the stars, he whispered, "God, I've always fought for what I wanted, never realizing that you already had a plan." And finally it became clear. He hadn't chosen Leah, but God had. She had been meant to be the mother of a great people. He had chased after Rachel, but through it God had shaped his heart. All of it, the pain, the waiting, the deception, had a purpose. Inside the tent, Leah and Rachel sat close, their silence long and deep. The bitterness between them had lasted as long as their marriage, but now something felt different. "I never meant to take your place, Rachel," Leah said softly, "but I always knew I wasn't the one he wanted." Rachel looked at her sister. For the first time she felt something new, compassion. "I suffered too," she whispered, tears falling. "I always tried to be first in Jacob's heart, and when I finally had a son, I realized it wasn't enough." Leah gently reached out and placed her hand over Rachel's. "The love of a man could never give us the peace we were looking for," she said softly. Her words struck a deep chord in Rachel's heart. All her life she had believed that Jacob's love would complete her, but now she understood. The love she had truly longed for came from God. For the first time, the two sisters embraced, not as rivals, but as women who had both suffered, both fought, and finally understood one another. The next morning, Jacob gathered his entire household. He looked at Leah and Rachel, and he could feel the change that had taken place. "We will begin the journey to the land God has promised us," he said. "But this time, we're not going as competitors. We're going as one family, healed and united." Laban stood nearby, watching silently. The control he once had over his daughters had slipped from his hands. "May the God of Abraham and Isaac be with you, Jacob," he said finally, accepting what he could no longer hold on to. And so Jacob, with his wives, children, servants, and flocks, began the journey toward the future God had prepared. Could a story born from trickery really end in grace? Years passed. Jacob, now aged and weathered by time, sat in the shade of a tall date palm. His eyes, lined with the weight of many trials, looked out across his camp. He saw his children, sons from Leah, Rachel, Bilhah, and Zilpah, all grown into strong tribes, just as God had promised long ago. He thought of the hardships, his struggle to marry Rachel, the pain between the sisters, and Laban's endless deception. But now, as he looked at the family around him, he saw something far greater. God's grace had overcome every sorrow. He watched Joseph, his beloved son, helping his brothers manage the animals. He remembered how Rachel had suffered, and how God had finally given her 2 sons, Joseph and Benjamin. He also thought of Leah, the wife he had never chosen, yet the one God had chosen to bless. She had given birth to 6 of the tribes of Israel, including Judah, the tribe from which the Messiah would one day come. Jacob realized that his life had not been random. Every painful moment, every betrayal, every tear had been used for something bigger than he could see. Looking up to the sky, Jacob whispered, "Now I see, Lord. What I once thought was just pain was actually your hand leading me all along." His sons, once divided by their mother's rivalry, were now learning to walk as brothers. The promise God made to Abraham and Isaac was now being fulfilled through them. The people of Israel were being formed, not through jealousy or revenge, but through God's grace. The cycle of pain had been broken, and grace had taken its place. But what lay ahead for Jacob's children? What new path would unfold? If this story moved you, 2 more powerful Bible stories will appear on your screen now. Click to watch them now. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. May God be with you, always.